Faraway Wanderers. Chapter 10. Netherworld. Zhou Zisha stared at the handprint for a while, then turned the corpse front down, undressing the body's upper half. Another handprint was on his back at the same position. Wen Kexing sighed. Was he branded, or the attack went through his body? Zhou Zisha replied nonchalantly. No one would waste their time to play with the dead. The attack went through from one side of his body to the other. I can only think of one person in the recent 50 years who is able to do this. It's the Raksha Palms from Sun Ding, the delighted morning ghost, Wen Kexing continued. Note: Rakshasa is a demon existing in Hindu mythology and Buddhism. Zhou Zisha glanced at him without replying, kneeling down to search Mu Yunja's body carefully. What he found were some banknotes and silvers. Oh! Stealthily left the Zhao's holdings at late night while carrying travel expenses. Zhou Zisha touched his own chest. So did he. Brother Wen, this night owl isn't out here to pick flowers. A sex offender doesn't need this much cash with him. Probably doesn't need extra clothes for bathing, either. Wen Kexing kicked a small bag hidden in a bush into the open. The bag was also made of black cloth, and inside was some clothes for changing when one was away from home. The forest earth was damp and soft with a chaotic map of footprints on it, but there didn't seem to be evidence of a fight. Beside the mark of the hand which caused instant death, there weren't any other wounds or scars on Mu Yunja's body. His famous sword was by his hip, still sheathed. Mu Yunja's kung fu was definitely above average, at least he would not fight back like a suckling. Zhou Zisha fell into silence, thinking perhaps the dignified and righteous swordsman of Duanjian Manor and the delighted morning ghost of the valley had arranged a date. A bloody one at that, which likely started out as a passionate, but the passion turned into anger afterwards. There seemed to be 3 people present before they arrived, and while Mu Yunja's footprints stopped here, the other 2's went in different directions, suggesting they might not be on the same side. One was no doubt chasing after Mu Yunja to this place, then sat down to examine the body just like what Zhou Zisha was doing right now. Zhou Zisha squatted on the ground, the old habit of questioning everything rearing its head again, making his insides itch. He felt an urge to follow the footprints, but rationality warned him that it would only lead to troubles. He was no longer the all-knowing mighty leader of Tianchuang. There was no point in burdening himself with inconveniences. Wen Kexing watched his companion sit in a terribly indecent fashion and look like it would take him forever to stand up. After a long while he couldn't help but ask, "You won't pursue them?" Zhou Zisha stared at him, still waging an internal war. Wen Kexing, after some thought, strode after the second one's footprints, saying, "Then I will." Zhou Zisha followed him unconsciously, speaking in surprise. You really want to be involved in something that's not your business? Wen Kexing's face was serious. Someone killed the Lord of Duanjian Manor, and I'm a charitable person who wants to gather merits, so why not? And I'm bored anyway. Zhou Zisha felt like the last sentence was incredibly reasonable, so he nodded, inquiring again, then why don't you follow the first person? Their footprints are very light, so they seem to be the strongest among the 3. Hypothetically speaking, if the third one was the last to come here and was from the Zhao's holding, then the first person is definitely Sun Ding, the delighted morning ghost. Wen Kexing completely deadpanned. You can chase after him if you want. I might be a nosy charitable person, but I also value my life. Zhou Zisha was made speechless by the other's honesty. He followed Wen Kexing closely, looking at the ground under them at a random point and noticing Wen Kexing didn't even leave any footprints. Someone who could travel without leaving a trace really just said that he was afraid of a ghost, afraid of death. Zhou Zisha, who used to manage and investigate all kinds of matter in the palace, decided to follow his desire to see this case through. Since he was already near death, he would do whatever he wanted. There was nothing in this world of which he should be afraid anymore. The 2 skilled and fearless men sprinted across the forest like shuttles. They found who they were looking for by the river bank, Yu Tianja of Huashan. He was strung up on a tree with silver threads that looked like a spider web, head almost fallen off his shoulder, only barely intact in the gentle blowing wind. A drop of blood fell on the ground, which prompted Wen Kexing to step back to avoid being stained. Then he nudged Yu Tianji's head, completely severing it from the body. The former part was still hung up by the threads, the latter part dropped to the ground with a thud. Wen Kexing touched the body all over, mouth pursed, still warm, he died not long ago. Spider silk. Zhou Zishu looked up to Yu Tianji's head, pausing shortly. It's the hanged ghost's spider silk. Tai Hu was truly destined for an exciting time to come. Suddenly, Zhou Zishu's ears caught on to something. He shouted, "Who's there?" Behind the tree, a shadow appeared and flew away, looking like a giant bat and disappearing almost instantly. Without hesitation, Zhou Zishu went after it. Wen Kexing still stood there, mumbling, "I'm scared of dying, scared of dying. That's why I can't stay here alone." Then he followed suit. Zhou Zishu took a pine cone, fingers crooked and aiming at the person in black's middle back, but since he always lacked strength after midnight, and coupled with the fact that he had been running for a long time, even though he hit the target, it only made them stumble forward a little and not falling as expected. They didn't even look back, only running faster. Zhou Zishu had doubts about whether this was the real Xue Fang, the hanged ghost. Evidently he would not be able to stand against this man, but if he was really one of King Zurige's 10 great ghosts, would he run after seeing a nobody like him? Zhou Zishu thought in astonishment, "I'm not a magic mirror either." Note: Zoya Zhang is used figuratively to describe things/people that can see the true nature of things and differentiate good and evil. They got out of the forest in a relatively short time. Behind the forest was a cemetery that spread wide and far, with will-o-wisps flickering all over the place. Seemed like the hanged ghost had reached his territory, as his silhouette became more mystical. Zhou Zishu was not sure if his mind was playing tricks on him, but he felt like he heard someone cackling. The laugh was right next to his ears for a sec, then far away the other, making his hair stand on end. Then the hanged ghost disappeared into thin air among the will-o-wisps. Zhou Zishu abruptly stopped walking. Wen Kexing stood beside him, the greenish light casted onto his handsome face, giving him a slightly more demonic look. Some kind of animal let out a howl from far away, and a rat crawled out from underground, staring at the two without fear. It might have devoured the flesh of the dead, since its tiny eyes were pure red. The hanged ghost disappeared under an old locust tree with an owl perched on its branch. The animal tilted its head at the two uninvited guests. Zhou Zishu and Wen Kexing checked around the tree but found no more clues. Zhou Zishu frowned, "We've really met a ghost." He heard a creepy laugh, turning to Wen Kexing with gooseflesh prickling his skin. His companion pointed at the owl, turned out the sound was from this ghostly animal. The owl and Zhou Zishu had a decently long staring contest before the former spread its wings and flew away without warning. Wen Kexing said, "There's this thing I heard when I was little, that owls are only scary when they laugh because there will be death whenever they do. Are you afraid?" Zhou Zishu was examining the tombstone under the tree, which didn't have any writings on it. He replied with indifference, "There are already 2 bodies." It was likely that Wen Kexing felt particularly in the mood, so he ignored the answer, continuing with enthusiasm. "I also heard that one day at this small village there was a person carrying a bowl with red water inside. An owl knocked the bowl over, and that year 20 people lost their lives." Zhou Zishu raised his head to look at him. Wen Kexing lowered his voice on purpose, "It's true. Why did that villager carry a bowl with red water?" Zhou Zishu asked in confusion. Wen Kexing choked on his words, turning away to cough. A faint smile appeared on Zhou Zishu's face. All of a sudden, he put his hands on the tombstone, and with just a bit of strength applied, it moved. He tried harder to push it to one side, and with a squashing sound, an entrance was revealed, leading into a dark space with unknown depth. Wen Kexing hurried to take a closer look, going round and round in front of the cave's entrance, tongue clicking. It's rumored that the point of connection between yin and yang carries a lot of yin energy, so there must be a dead locust tree next to it. Do you know that it's called the yin tree? or the ghost tree. Zhou Zishu had his arms crossed, face expressionless at the other's ghost stories. Wen Kexin's descriptions were vivid. Under the old locust there will be an unknown tombstone, and under them is the path to the underworld in legends. During the full moon of the 7th month, wandering souls will crawl out from the nether to return to the mortal realm. The path to the yellow spring is incredibly cold, and at the end you'll see the gates of hell. Once going past that, you'll no longer see the living, there are equinox flowers growing along the way, and then you'll reach the bridge of helplessness. Hey! Notes. Asterisk the 15th day of the 7th month of the Chinese calendar is also called the Ghost Day. The 7th month is regarded as when spirits and ghosts come out of the underworld. Asterisk Yellow Spring, Chinese term for the underworld. Asterisk Equinox flower, the flowers associated with death. They are also believed to grow in hell and guide the souls into their next reincarnation. Asterisk Bridge of Helplessness, the bridge that every soul has to cross before being reincarnated. Zhou Zishu already jumped down. Wen Kexing stared dumbfoundedly at the other's silhouette disappearing behind the entrance before jumping himself. He landed steadily, finding out that the earth was very firm. He looked up to see Zhou Zishu's fleeting smile and the other asking, "Is Brother Wen also interested in seeing the path to the underworld?" Wen Kexing nodded, entirely serious. "So that the next time I tell my tales, I can officially add that they're true stories." Zhou Zishu shook his head, still smiling. All of a sudden, Wen Kexing silenced them with a gesture, listening attentively with a frown. "Can you hear it? What's that sound?" His voice lowered. Zhou Zishu tried to distinguish it carefully, his answer indecisive. "Is it water?" In split seconds, Wen Kexing lit up, taking the lead without forgetting to keep his voice down, "So the legends are true indeed." In front of them was a long narrow path, so cramped that two men couldn't walk side by side, only when they had to shrink their shoulders and crouch down was it somewhat manageable. Zhou Zishu did not enjoy this posture at all, thinking that maybe this path was not the official, but one reserved only to women and children. It was unclear how far in they had gone. Dirt fell on both of them, but the end was bright and vast. It led to a large cave, with a small river flowing across with unknown origin and destination. There seemed to be wind inside this cave, but it was also unclear where it came from. The dreary chill came at them from every directions. Even Wen Kexing shut his mouth at that moment, no longer rambling about how the path to the yellow spring is incredibly cold. End chapter. Faraway Wanderers. Chapter 11. The Cave. Zhou Zishu stood before the yellow spring in contemplation before turning back to the way he came. The devil-made work for idle hands, all the time lazying around at the Zhao's, had apparently made him jump down here without a thought. Huashan Sec's patriarch was no honorable type, but his son was even worse, having indulged in debauchery at such a young age. Besides, they were all pugilist wanderers. Being attacked was all in a day's work. No matter where Yu Tianjia was severed his head or his family jewels, it didn't concern Zhou Zishu in the slightest. It might have been for Wen Kexing's ghostly tales, but he suddenly had a bad feeling. The underground cave carried a sinister atmosphere. Zhou Zishu calculated, since he only had 2.5 years left, it was better to help the dying and injured, making the best of his time to do good. Not crawling into a grave with a man who was not always right in the head. But when he was tracing the way back, there was an abrupt thud, like a mechanism being switched. Around the entrance, hundreds of steel knives extended from the wall, blocking the path. Zhou Zishu was fortunate to have retreated in time, or else he would have been skewered. He frowned, staring at those knives, then looked at Wen Kexing. "Who did you offend?" The surprise question left Wen Kexing's eyes wide open. He looked like he was greatly wounded by the words. "Why is it that I had to offend someone for this to happen?" Zhou Zishu scoffed and shook his head. He had no choice but to move forward along the yellow spring. It was possible that he could find another exit somewhere. "Are you saying it's because of me and not you? I'm virtually unknown and have just entered Jianghu recently, I have never commit thievery, the only thing I have been doing is traveling in peace. Who could ever hold a grudge against me? Wen Kexing fell into silence, having enough of his companion's bold-faced lies. After a while, he spoke with a gentle voice, "You escorted Zhang Chengling, you have killed 32 in total along the way, including 4 of the extremely dangerous type like Qin Song. My ass, there are only 11 at most." Zhou Zisha replied, "Those in the shrine died under your little mate's hands. So it's still definitely you." Wen Kexing held out his hands, "These hands of mine, ever since I left home to join Jianghu they have not been stained with any blood, even that of a chicken, much less a human. How can it be possible that I have offended anyone?" Zhou Zisha didn't spare him a glance. That prompted Wen Kexing to walk faster, standing in front of the other with an exaggerated expression of seriousness. "It might be hard to believe because of how I look, but I swear I'm a good person." Zhou Zisha nodded, "Of course, Mr. Good Person Wen. Now that it's clear I'm just a murderous demon, it's better for you to get out of my way." Wen Kexing seemed to ignore the half-hearted nature of the response as he still wore a blinding smile, "I will leave you alone once you admit that you're wearing a disguise." Zhou Zisha smiled back, "How generous of you. Please, don't mention it." Zhou Zisha sidestepped him to go forward. Wen Kexing followed 2 steps behind, still smiling. The water of the spring flowed quite rapidly. Zhou Zisha kicked a rock down there, but it was unable to see the true depth. It twisted and turned in a complicated pattern, and there also seemed to be fish but they swam too fast to be visible. Zhou Zisha was not good at swimming, the best he could do was holding his breath for a long time underwater so he would not die instantly upon jumping down. After examining, he decided it was better to stay away from it. The cave seemed to connect to many paths at all directions, since the sound of their footsteps and conversations could travel real far. Suddenly, Zhou Zisha stopped walking. "Brother Wen, look!" Wen Kexing followed his gaze to a pile of bones not too far away. He mumbled, "Shouldn't the path to the yellow spring be lined with equinox flowers? And the dead should only have their souls left, why are there bones here?" Zhou Zisha flicked at the bones, holding up a half-destroyed skull on one hand and the matchbook on another, sizing it up carefully. This skull was crushed, the part where it connects to the spine seems to be slashed. No, the wound is uneven, there are teeth marks here. Did an animal bite them? Can an animal bite someone's head off? Wen Kexing asked. Zhou Zisha picked up a thigh bone. Teeth marks. More teeth marks, they're quite small. He was hit with a sense of familiarity, as if he had seen them before somewhere. But he had never been a coroner, so the memory slipped his mind at the time. Wen Kexing felt his stomach churning a little, taking the thigh bone from Zhou Zisha with only 2 fingers. "This is quite a clean work we've got here, even cleaner than me gnawing on chicken bones," he said after examining. Zhou Zisha decided to stop having chicken drumsticks from now on. Who could have left such bites? Can it be a wild beast? Wen Kexing thought about it for a bit. "I heard that in the underworld there is this giant beast called Diting. Do you know if it likes meat or not?" Note: Ditng is a mythical beast in Buddhism under the control of Kitagarbha. It is said to be able to see through everything and can detect people's truest desires in their heart. It was clear that he still hadn't given up on his ghost stories. Zhou Zisha put on a fake smile, "You just have to wait until you're 100 years old and leave this world to go down to hell." He didn't get to finish as there were sounds of water sloshing behind them. In the dark cave, the sounds made their hair stand on end. Zhou Zisha and Wen Kexing turned to that direction and took 1 step back, facing the small river with their guard raised. Wen Kexing spoke slowly, "I also heard that Diting doesn't live in the Yellow Spring, and there aren't that many, either. Out from the river crawled many, human-looking creatures, but not really. Their limbs were extra long and their stature was short. They were completely naked, their flesh pale from being underwater, and they had very long hair. Their body width was unnaturally large, twice or thrice that of a normal human. Their eyes shone a distant light while they gradually drew closer. Zhou Zishu looked down and bit his wrist, then spoke to Wen Kexing while staring at the faint teeth marks. I remember it now, those small marks are what? Wen Kexing asked while retreating. Human teeth. Wen Kexing halted after that, coughing, fixing his hair and clothes. He made a salutation at the approaching monsters. My good brothers, we barged into this place completely by accident, we didn't at all mean to offend, so please. Zhou Zishu snorted in an unchanged arming way. The humanoid monsters let out a ghastly howl before coming at Wen Kexing. Wen Kexing yelled indignantly, I haven't finished. In contrast, he dodged the attackers like a flying leaf, moving to the side without any effort. The monsters' reflexes and movements were fast as they immediately changed direction to chase after him, claws extracted and glinting, leaving marks on the ground that were about 2 inches deep. Zhou Zishu smiled. How is it, Brother Wen, are you speechless? The monsters' attack officially began. Zhou Zishu wouldn't treat those like humans as they were definitely far from it, their durability was unfathomable and their destructive power was immense. They were also fast and didn't seem to experience pain. Zhou Zishu's hand was on one's chest, attacking it with all of his might. A rock would have exploded after that move, but as the monster was knocked flying back against the wall, they only screeched before standing back up. Zhou Zishu was internally unsettled, he couldn't think of what it actually was. He heard a crack beside him. It turned out to be a sneak attacker being caught and having its neck snapped by Wen Kexing. Wen Kexing smiled, now I've saved you once. Zhou Zishu also realized in contrast to their firm body mass, the monster's neck was incredibly fragile, unable to support its head at times. He was surprised that Wen Kexing found out so quickly. Despite that, he replied with politeness, thank you. Another one barged at them, which Zhou Zishu evaded. His elbow curved to strike at the monster's back, and his fingers made a clawing movement to twist the neck. They made light work of taking down a few more. At least those creatures still had a bit of intellect in them, as they grew fearful after not being able to subdue their prey. Their leader howled, and they slowly returned to the water. Randomly, one would have its head above the water, staring at their abnormally powerful intruders. Zhou Zishu whispered, with their size, they can clearly bite our heads off. We shouldn't stay here any longer, let's go. Wen Kexing replied after a bout of contemplative silence, I've figured it out. Zhou Zishu presumed he had found out what the monster was. Figured out what? He asked without thinking. Real human skin will redden if you pinch it, since I can't make out your disguise, can you let me pinch your face a little? Zhou Zishu walked away, not bothering with an answer. He must have been mad for having taken this person seriously. Wen Kexing followed him close behind. Did I finally get you, and because of that you don't want me to touch your face? I knew it, I knew you used some kind of tricks. Are you so beautiful that you're afraid some sleazy deviants will be after you? No worries, Brother Zhou, I am a completely righteous and honorable individual, I'll never do any harm. So, can you let me see your true visage? Zhou Zishu turned a deaf ear with incredible restraint. But then Wen Kexing changed his tone. Although, your skills are truly no joke, I can't think of anyone who can be that good. Are you, from the fabled Tian Chuang? Zhou Zishu stopped walking. In the darkness of the cave, Wen Kexing's smile seemed to carry another meaning to it. But Zhou Zishu only held up his index finger to stop the other, voice lowered, can you hear it? They went quiet. In the deeper part of the cave echoed the roars of a beast. It's the one that can bite off a human's head. Wen Kexing had no interest in those beasts, his eyes were fixed on Zhou Zishu alone. The man didn't react to his earlier words at all, only listening to his surroundings intently, his eyes and expressions never wavered. Another roar can be heard, significantly louder now, as if the beast had moved closer. Zhou Zishu saw the underwater monsters all cowering in supposed fear. He tugged at Wen Kexing, and they took a turn into another trail. Zhou Zishu took out a small bottle, sprinkling something along the way. Then they hid in a corner and held their breath. End chapter. Faraway Wanderers. Chapter 12. Illusions. Wen Kexing had no idea what the dust that Zhou Zishu had sprinkled was, but he didn't ask, as if he already knew what the other was capable of. He stood beside Zhou Zishu silently. Seconds later, the heavy breathing of the slowly approaching beast could be heard. The creature seemed to have noticed something, maintaining a slow tread. It went by a spot that was about 10 feet away from them. The creature was dog-like but as big as a pony, black all over. It panted through the nose, and in the air was a faint fishy smell. It slowed down even more, sniffing the air like it was suspicious of something. Zhou Zishu crossed his arms in front of his chest, leaning on the wall, eyes narrowed, watching the scene intently. There was a fleeting hint of a smile on Wen Kexing's face. It was chilling and only there for a split second. The beast was not far away, but it had yet to notice the two's presence. It stood still for a while, then moved forward, being watched by two pair of human eyes. It followed the smell of blood to the corpses of the underwater monsters. After sniffing, it bellowed, head lowered and mouth chewing happily. It truly was able to decapitate the humanoid monsters. Wen Kexing and Zhou Zishu glanced at each other. Zhou Zishu was quietly terrified. While he wasn't a coroner, he had been through a lot in life and his knowledge was vast. It was impossible that he couldn't recognize a human head. Is that creature really human? He mused. If it was, how did it come to this? Wen Kexing poked at him, pointing at a small road. Zhou Zishu nodded, leaving carefully. The road widened and narrowed in an unpredictable fashion. After an unknown amount of turns far away from their starting point, Wen Kexing asked, "There are other teeth marks on the bones of those dead monsters, do you think they cannibalize?" When he wasn't talking nonsense, his voice was low, almost like sighing with no strength to it, as if he didn't want to waste energy, completed with a hint of indifference. He paused, then continued, "Are they human?" Zhou Zishu looked at him, voice also low, "Forgive me, I'm just a fool with shallow knowledge." Wen Kexing laughed softly, "You, shallow knowledge? Ha!" He didn't ask further and kept walking. After an indefinite time, at another turn, when the rapidly flowing yellow spring appeared again in front of their eyes, Zhou Zishu called out, "Wait!" Wen Kexing looked back at him, the irritating demeanor making a return. "What's wrong, beautiful brother Zhou?" Zhou Zishu knew all too well that reacting would only goad the other on, so he ignored the gibberish. Those underwater creatures are incredibly strong and fast, and they can move in the water naturally. The beast we saw walks on land and is aware that it has to stay away from the river. If it doesn't hunt near the water, how can it catch the monsters? Wen Kexing stopped walking, examining the ground under them. It was unclear whether he was monologuing or speaking to Zhou Zishu. How big is this place? Why did it feel like the road was never ending? Zhou Zishu suddenly spoke after falling into pensiveness. "This river flows from east to west. I remember the direction very clearly. Even though we took a few turns, we're still going in the north-south direction." "You mean we're running in circles?" Sudden enthusiasm took over Wen Kexing. He blinked. "I also heard about this one story where a person..." Zhou Zishu turned his back to him, making a mark on the wall with his fingertip, then wordlessly left to walk along the mysterious river. Wen Kexing didn't mind his ghost stories being ignored. He rubbed his nose, following the other with a smile. Suddenly, they heard a roar that seemed to shake the whole cave. In the middle of it was a piercing scream that possibly belonged to a child. Zhou Zishu stopped walking. The child's miserable crying began to get louder. Zhou Zishu swiftly dashed to that direction. He was 10 feet away in just a blink of an eye. Wen Kexing didn't get to say what he wanted to, his extending arm hanging in midair. He swallowed back the words, shaking his head and following the other. They saw under the claws of the half-dog half-horse creature was a little girl. The big fangs were right next to the girl's pale neck, seemingly about to bite down. Zhou Zishu propelled himself higher in the air and struck down at the monster. Ranged attack was one of his fortes, and the creature was hit right in the head, its whole body knocked and rolled to one side. He picked up the child who was only weakly breathing. The beast shook its head with all its might, as if it was disoriented after being hit. After a moment, it realized that Zhou Zishu had stolen its food and roared, charging toward him. At first Zhou Zishu was going to throw her to Wen Kexing by instinct but then paused. His feet started to move around in a strange pattern, his body mysteriously able to retreat several feet away. He put the girl down and kept moving. The beast followed, the stench from its bloody mouth was headache-inducing. Zhou Zishu jumped to a high place before landing himself on top of the beast in just seconds. Wen Kexing stood there, completely disregarding the crying girl with an expressionless face. Zhou Zishu used the fall of 1,000 weight to keep the beast down, but it was a smart creature, its body toppling over to roll. If someone were to roll with it, they would be crushed to dust even if they were made of metal. Note: a martial art move from the cherry blossom pole, kung fu style. Zhou Zishu immediately took advantage of that to jump down with a shout, kicking at its belly. The creature's back was full of tough muscles but the stomach area was really soft, and the kick nearly turned over every organ inside. It roared in pain, but could still stand up thanks to the thick skin's protection. Its mouth widened to bite at Zhou Zishu. Its back legs were incredibly strong and despite being in agony, it was still very fast. Zhou Zishu was about to dodge when his internal strength suddenly hit a wall. The beast's sharp teeth were right in front of him at that moment. He pressed down at his chest with one palm and bent the elbow of the other arm, risking his life facing the attack to hit his elbow at the creature's nose. There was a sound of its nose being broken, its claw tearing Zhou Zishu's left shoulder, making him bleed instantly. Zhou Zishu realized the nose was the creature's weakness. He ignored his wound, using his hand to strike at the beast's nose again with enough momentum to completely shatter the bones on its forehead too. It staggered a few steps and went down with a loud rumble. Zhou Zishu frowned, blocking the acupuncture points on his shoulder to stop the bleeding. He was about to use the water from the yellow spring to clean the wound, but then remembered the half-human half-demon creatures down there and gave up the idea. He heard Wen Kexing let out an "oh," then, "Do you have internal injuries?" Zhou Zishu turned his head to glance at the other and replied calmly, "Just haven't had enough food tonight." Then he bent down to pick up the young girl, patting her back and speaking to her with a gentle voice, "Where are you from? How did you get here?" Wen Kexing laughed mockingly at that. "You should rather ask her what kind of demon she is. Why did you save her anyway?" The girl didn't say anything, only burrowing herself deeper into Zhou Zishu's embrace. Zhou Zishu stopped asking, saying to Wen Kexing, "For gathering merits." Wen Kexing stared at his bloody shoulder in deep thoughts, then suddenly smiled, "I've caught you, brother Zhou. Forgot to disguise the skin on your shoulder, that area looks really different from your face and neck." Zhou Zishu only paused for a few seconds before answering curtly, "It's because of sunbathing." Wen Kexing was still smiling, "Is it really? This is the first time I've heard that a pale beauty can have that haggard shade of skin after sunbathing." Pale beauty Zhou Zishu was given the heebie-jeebies after those words. Still carrying the girl, he was about to say something when his eyes caught something and saw a strange scene. On the body of the dead beast, a plant sprung up, glowing then blooming. "It's a cherry blossom tree." Wen Kexing followed his gaze, his face quickly paling. Zhou Zishu had no time to care about that, he stood stock still, gawking at the still-growing blossom tree. In the air was an unknown fragrance. The body of the dog-like beast was nowhere to be seen, and the flowers kept blooming as though absorbing magical energy. Soon, it spread out wide, seemed like he could even touch it if he had reached out. Then there was a person standing under the tree. He was a young man with thick brows and big eyes, full lips, seemingly always smiling. Blossom petals fell on his shoulders but he cared none about it, only extending his hand, lips moving. Zhou Zisha could make out what he was speaking, senior brother. It was Juxiao. At that moment, it was possible that his heart had stopped beating. There was sudden sharp pain on his shoulder. Zhou Zisha cried out, having lowered his guard. He looked down to see the little girl in his arms opening her mouth to sink her teeth into his wound. He acted on instinct and used internal strength to throw her off. When he pulled himself together, the cherry blossom tree and the person disappeared in front of him. Now was only the dark cave with the beast's corpse on the ground and the pile of bones that they had examined moments ago. The girl that he threw off let out an inhuman scream. When he looked clearly, she was not at all a human girl, but actually the underwater monster. The little monster screamed with its mouth open, staring at his bleeding wound hungrily. It was eager to pounce again, but suddenly a hand stuck out and grabbed its neck. The creature didn't even get to struggle before its neck was snapped and it died immediately. Wen Kexing's lips curled in amusement, discarding the body without a thought. He spoke as if nothing happened. Those underwater things still dare go on land even when they're afraid of the beast. Seems like there aren't just us two down here. All strength seemed to have left Zhou Zishu. He forced out a laugh. Did we just go in circles and back to the original spot then? Wen Kexing sized him up. Can you walk? I can carry you. Bridal style is completely alright too, as long as you let me see your real face. Zhou Zishu smiled drily. Thank you, but there's no need. He covered the shoulder wound, lifted his spirits and continued walking along the yellow spring. Then he asked like he just remembered something. Back then I saw a tree with flowers growing from the beast's corpse, with prince's feathers jumping and singing. What did you see? Note, prince's feathers, a plant of the Polygonaceae family, also called the dog's tail plant in China due to the shape of the flowers. Wen Kexing replied from behind him, I saw an owl. I told you before that owls laughing will only bring bad luck, and I was right, wasn't I? Then I also a person carrying a bowl with red water, and the owl knocked it over. Zhou Zishu kept his mouth shut. He told a lie. It was fair that his companion told a lie in return. He took the lead and didn't look back, so he didn't see Wen Kexing's expression at that moment. The smile on the man's face seemed to freeze there for a long time and his eyes were blank. It was unclear that he was looking down at the ground or at something very far away. Seeing that Zhou Zishu had no patience for his owl story, he swallowed it down and followed the other. End chapter.